fought so long, you know, and so much money. I think about all the money that went into, you know, into fighting you guys, and you guys, I mean, you know, the lawyers and NCES and Casella, and all the money that could have gone to our children. Like, what kind of message are we giving to our children when we allow, you know, when everyone, you know, allows, you know, for the town, for the community, for citizens to be bullied, you know, with lobbyists and money and pressure. It's like we reprimand our children in schools to not bully one another. But what kind of message are we giving if this is allowed? You know, this is 17 years of fighting. I mean, enough really is enough, you know? I like, you know, hearing everyone say their little story. It's like, I imagine this is probably just like the same thing over and over, you know? It's kind of like, enough is enough, and I'm kind of ashamed and disappointed, not ashamed, but disappointed that you guys would come at this town again and like ask for more when already so much was taken. A big, you know, burden this town has taken from all, you know, from taking all the trash from New England. And the community was parted, you know, it stifled the growth and broke some spirits, you know, but regardless, the town, whew, and their people are totally energized, and I love you guys, because you rock. And I love Bethlehem and the Colonial and all of the businesses and the food, the big Keep Growing initiatives, fabulous. I'm a farmer, I love growing good food, eating it, and growing it. And, well, you know, we need to definitely start to think about, I think, the reverse, you know, repairing the damage that's been done and not continuing to add to the damage by adding another landfill. You know, Julian Zarni can't be here tonight. He's watching, I don't know, Disney on Ice or something, I'm not sure. No, Stars on Ice, right. And, but he did want me to mention too, something that he brought up. Over to the left, my left, your right, there's a big sign, it's all invasive plants, you know, invasive plants to our area. I did have one that showed invasive insects, but I forgot that one. But it's actually kind of lovely to look at, you know. But he mentioned here, let me get this going here. The White Mountain National Forest Forestry Department drafted this thing on invasive forest insects and a disease action plan, and it just talks about the potential of all of these invasive species. You know, let me get out the sheet. The Asian longhorn beetle, relatively stationary in the Boston-Worcester area, no detections currently in New Hampshire, but who's to say that on a load of trash headed up to the North Country, like an Asian longhorn beetle doesn't jump on for a ride? And, you know, I mean, there's the potential of all sorts of things, I guess, but needless to say, the moral of the story, oh, another thing, all right, let's get it here. There is this big 33rd Annual Northeast Recycling Conference and Expo going on. It's June 9th and 10th, and I really want to go. And I was wondering if DES would pay for my ticket to go. Or Casella. I'm really interested in dropping papers all over the floor. And I'm also interested in this keynote. This guy, Jack Macy, he's part of the San Francisco Zero Waste Initiative, and he'll be there to discuss the Zero Waste Initiative and all these incredible recycling systems and composting initiatives. You know, this two-day thing is something that I think everyone should go to. And if you guys are interested in paying for me to go, I would hotel another day too. Or Casella, you guys can Uber. But no, but seriously though, I really do hope that you don't allow this to go through. I mean, enough really is enough. And with all the landfills that exist currently in the state of New Hampshire, 149 and 49 and 11 states to supply in-state capacity, which I feel like, you know, we have enough for in-state capacity for the next 20 years. I understand the interstate commerce laws. We need to start to reevaluate policies, maybe rewrite them. So Linda Massimilla, Rebecca Brown, Jeff Woodburn, get the representatives, write some new things, get in front of the legislature, pass some bills. Let's start getting a little bit more, you know, active and stuff. I think that, you know, you guys are great. Thank you, everyone. You know, all of you. It's everyone's job, I understand. What you guys are doing, you know, NCES, Casella, you're just doing your job, you know, that's your money, but it's the future of our environment, and we are our environment. We got to work together to protect the waterways. That's it. Thank you. See you later.
And next up is Asher Solomon, and Asher, just a moment, please. Alan Jackson will be up after that.
I'm awful at public speaking. I'm just not good.
Some of the things that Jerry Eames, Rita Farrell, and Fallon O'Brien said really resonated with me. I am a mechanical engineer in training and an electronic artist. I recently, as an engineer, I sort of think of my imagination as being accurate to reality. And the things that Jerry Eames was saying about the potential for this system to fail brings into the question, what are the erosion ways that exist in this valley? And where is this landfill with respect to the erosion ways? The fact that this system is going to fail is an inevitability. So I turned to his testimony to be fairly accurate. Got some prepared statements. This decision is in the hands of the Department of Environmental Services. I'm not going to tell DES about facts they already have in their hands, but I will put these facts in a light which will not sugarcoat them. To assume that this agency is objective would be to ignore that the decision makers have been appointed by representatives within a democratic republic. Therefore, we do not assume these decision makers are objective. We recognize that in order for them to become objective, they must show great courage to overcome the fear of possibly losing their position within this agency as a result of making an ethical judgment. This landfill was originally a private junkyard, and it conformed to no environmental regulations to provide enough protections to groundwater or the adjacent river. As a retrofit from a junkyard to a landfill, the site was exempt from some modern planning requirements, which new landfills must adhere to. Sites for new landfills are selected with great care, impact on the water table, underground rivers and adjacent wetlands and rivers are all reasons for selecting land which is composed of dense clay and not mountain stone. This is not a good place to put a new capacity. There are better places to put this waste. The Environmental Protection Agency and the Clean Air Act provide limits to the amounts of pollution which can legally be tolerated. This means that as long as these levels are not reached, there will be a yes or no answer to whether this pollution is occurring. This is in contradiction to common sense. Just because they haven't reached the limit doesn't mean that there aren't impacts to the environment for people. We recently had a hearing on whether the landfill was conforming with the Clean Air Act. It was stated that levels 1/10 that of the legal limit could be tolerated. This makes about as much sense as saying that a person who is drinking and blows a .07 is fit to drive. It may conform with the law, but it doesn't conform with common sense. There are residents, frogs, moose, who are being exposed to sulfur dioxide and volatile organic compounds every day. To argue that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few may be logical, but it's not human. The laws which protect interstate trade were put in place to promote economic development, but were not intended to protect the environment. Free trade has the intent to promote commerce, and the law has been written with very few powers to impede trade. Environmental protection has the intent to prevent commerce from occurring in order to protect the environment despite trade. Therefore, the DES was created to uphold fair trade policy in contradiction of free trade. This is not a conflict which exists within a vacuum. The history of fair trade and free trade spans the entire globe and all of history. To understand the context of this decision, we have to look at the impact of decisions made in the past. Empire and centralization of the modern economy has violently enforced its right to conduct commerce in every corner of the world with severe consequences. This really is bullying. In a colony within China, in China, the British Empire waged a war to enforce its importation of opium in Pakistan. The result was a colony within China, Shanghai, a colony where trade of opium could not be restricted, where vice and sin could not be abated. In Jamaica and Mexico, free trade was enforced by the United States to protect the food industry, making the continental U.S. the only source of food, flooding the markets and forcing out local agriculture. The result is a permanent trade imbalance with Mexico, where the demand for food forces them to sell whatever they can at whatever cost. It displaces families, promotes drug trade, and perpetuates a war driven by a trade imbalance. Free trade and free market solution to environmental protection is not sufficient to protect this ecosystem. And I go back to what Rita Farrell's testimony was, to say that the laws which protect this landfill industry have been put in place with the intent of maintaining capacity for the residents of New Hampshire, and not that of New England. New Hampshire is legally required to project the growth of this industry based on the needs of its own residents. But the intent of the law does not require the state to project growth based on the desire of a corporation to conduct interstate commerce. It is for this reason that this permit can be denied, because the intent of the law protects the DES in its decision. The DES must show courage to deny this permit. And I've also got a online petition that I put together and has received 100 signatures so far. I'll submit that as my testimony with their comments.
Alan Jackson, to be followed by Landfill.
Seems to me that back in 2006, we had a proposal to close a landfill in 10 years. That's only a scant 20 months away. It was voted down. I'm not sure why. I would ask Brian Gould, I understand he's here somewhere, if that document was legal, and would it have held up at the end of the 10 years? And would the the landfill, would Casella have closed as they suggested, and would they have gone away at that point? As far as the Ammonoosuc River is concerned, I would like to remind Jerry that the Littleton unlined landfill sits right on the Ammonoosuc River, and I would have serious doubts if that thing is totally safe, because it is unlined. And while I would hate to think that I live in a town that's upstream of my neighbors, that we would pollute them, I would look at home first, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Len Reed?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Len Reed, and I'm a resident of Bethlehem. And I was asked to come here by one of my neighbors, Leslie Dreyer, who was unable to get back from his current location. And he asked me to specifically ask that in some fashion you indicate, the DES indicate what eventuality or activity would merit a denial decision on the part of DES. Is there a specific action or activity of an applicant that would merit denial? That was his question. While I was looking through all of the stuff that he sent me, and this probably is more for our Board of Selectmen than anything else, but I noted that the total valuation at our last tax evaluation. The total valuation of the landfill area was $10 million, some odd $100,000, about 4% of the town's total valuation. The taxes that they paid in 2013 were $284,000, which amounts to 0.1% of the total taxation. So if taxes are a measure of the New Hampshire way, we need to kind of reevaluate how the taxes are allocated, because they are paying far less than I paid as a percentage of my property value, or than probably any other resident. Thank you.
And Barbara Thompson, I'm sorry I didn't warn you, but you are next up.
I'm just behind what everyone else said, and hope that you say no.
Thank you. So we have made it clear through the deck. I'm going to call first for were there any people that didn't sign a card that now wanted an opportunity to speak. Okay. Your name, please?
Don Lovelock.
Can you come forward and identify yourself, and I'll have you fill out a card retrospectively?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight.
And would you again state your name?
Don Lovelock. I hadn't planned to speak tonight as a member of the planning board. I felt it best to not speak because the application may come before us for site plan review. But when I got here, I talked to Jerry Blanchard, the head of the vice chair of the select board, and asked him if the select board was planning to hire an engineering firm or legal firm to review the application like they had done in past years. And he said the board felt it wasn't necessary because of the scrutiny that DES performs. I'd like to ask the DES, in light of our tight budget condition in the state of New Hampshire, and the state ever cutting budgets and things like that, where do you stand on your budget for scrutiny of the permit, in supervision during any construction should it occur, and monitoring after completion and after closure? The town has decided it doesn't need to double check things. Do you feel you have the resources and the funds to adequately permit, inspect construction, and follow through on closure? Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will cycle back through again. I'm going to start at the beginning of the list, and that was Cheryl Jensen.
Yes, I would like to.
I guess I'd like to follow up on the question that Len Reed asked on behalf of Leslie Dreyer. What would it take for DES to deny this permit?
The simple answer is there are grounds for denial specific in the rules, and to the extent that the agency finds that there are grounds for denial, that's what the decision would be.
So you can't really say one thing or two things that would cause you to deny the
I
permit.
could read you the rule,
Yeah.
but it is specific in the rule, and there's a spectrum of issues. Failure to meet the design criteria. Not true.
What about failure on the fact that it looks like capacity may not really be needed? If DES, as was pointed out here, deny arbories for it, as they said, passing it as a union. And I guess that would be something that would cause DES to deny this permit.
The issue of passing these for public benefit is one of the many factors the agency has to consider to make a decision. So certainly that's on the table. I can point you to the rules, and after you review them, and if you have additional questions about it, or I can read those rules, but there's a long list. It's very specific, and the application review is complex, and there isn't one thing that I can cite for you here
Okay.
that might form those grounds.
It had just been a question that was kicking around, and I knew that there wouldn't really be an answer that we would hear tonight, but I just thought
Well,
I'd try.
If
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I will just say that it's not random. We review this application within the context of the rules, and there are grounds for denial, and we look to those for guidance in making our decision. I was going to go through, if you, Jerry Curran, Richard Polonsky, Andrew.
Okay, I'm going to start with groundwater and the leaking liner. Again, the New Hampshire Groundwater Protection Act, RSA 485C, states, quote, 60% of New Hampshire residents are dependent on groundwater for their drinking water supplies. The greatest threat to groundwater is contamination from mismanaged activity on the land surface, unquote. We know Casella has mismanaged leachate. NCS admitted it in the response to the denied permit in 2009. Quote, the company presented documentation, this is from DES response. The company presented documentation in an attempt to prove that the liner was not the cause of the contamination, but most likely the result of previously known leachate spills, as well as an accidental leachate discharge that occurred during construction of the site in 2006. Unquote. If it was true in 2006 that construction caused leachate discharge, it would be safe to say that there must have been leaks from all the recent construction. I know there was, I hear it. This past summer, when I filed complaints about odor and noise, I was told that the disturbance was due to the excavation required to reopen capped areas and relocate waste. How often did somebody in DES go and check to see if there were leaks and if contamination was reoccurring? I guess I want an answer. Do people from DES on a regular basis go to the site?
Yes.
In March 2009, DES's concern for groundwater contamination continued. It noted, quote, the applicant provides no information to determine the source of the continued groundwater contamination at the site, and DES could not rule out that the liner leak was the cause of excidients against background in the release of detection wells. NCS has failed to prove that the landfill liners was not leaking and causing groundwater contamination, but then somehow or other they still got the permit. DES has major concerns then. What proof is there now that the liner is not leaking? Who is actually doing the monitor? Has DES actually gone to observe firsthand any of the testing? Your concerns, DES and ours, are justified. Groundwater contamination from landfills have been documented. There is a company in Texas called Leak Location Services Incorporated, and they are a company that monitors for leaks in landfills. And they state, quote, 82% of surveyed landfill cells have leaked, while 41% had leaked areas more than 1 square foot. The Government Accountability Office in Washington, D.C. reported in February 18, 2011, quote, One category of contaminated sites, landfill and other waste disposal facilities, made up of more of 1/3 of the 1,397 sites EPA placed on the national priority list from 1983 to 2007. And EPA's expenditures of those 511 sites totaled $3.6 billion through 2007. According to the EPA, landfill sites on the National Priority List generally share similar characteristics and present similar threats to the environment. For example, these sites generally exhibit contamination in various medias such as soil, surface, and groundwater. I'm still from the EPA. Landfill sites that are placed on the National Priority List are generally large and contain a variety of contaminants, which may interact with the environment in three main ways. First, precipitation or liquid waste in the landfill can interact with other materials in the landfill and form leachate. And kind of that's why Littleton probably won't be leaking, because they're capped, so the water's not coming through, causing the leachate to move. So that's the answer there. Second, surface water, such as rainfall, can run through the landfill and carry chemicals from the landfill into nearby lakes, streams, and wetlands. Third, the degeneration of landfill contents produces landfill gas, which generally contain methane, sometimes in potentially explosive concentrations, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and other toxic contaminants. And then they've talked about the threats to human health. I see my time's up.
Sorry.
Still have more.
We'll abide by the rules, and you're welcome to come back up. Jerry Ames?
I think to consider very seriously the Clean Water Act and the concern that this huge landfill is just 700 feet above the Amazonic River. If it ever slides into the river, this landfill expansion could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Right now it's an if. It could turn into a when. If you throw that on there, this unstable, humongous mass of who knows what. It slides in the river. It damages the largest ecological river system in New England. It would cause untold economic and ecological damage. Consider that. Right up here, it flows all the way down, contaminating every tributary that feeds in. And look at the map of the Connecticut River, if you haven't. How many tributaries feed the Connecticut River? All those tributaries would run into the Connecticut River, end up at Long Island Sound, and then south, right from here, nothing New Hampshire. The risk is too great to add anything else onto this landfill. Please do not allow this expansion to occur. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeannie Roselard?
Pam, you mentioned, or in that presentation, it was mentioned that NCES was going to be taking in special wastes. What are those special wastes?
There's a range of them. I think I'll have Mike explain. In general, what is considered special waste.
In general, special wastes are Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Just raise your hand if you can. Okay. Well, the special wastes are wastes that are really, that are solid waste, but they're not the traditional household waste that you think of as solid waste. It can be things like mildly contaminated soils that are not hazardous waste. They can be wastewater treatment plant sludges or industrial sludges that are, again, not hazardous waste, and things that are not traditionally the things that come out of your household, which is generally called MSW. So it's those types of things.
What about medical?
They would be allowed to take treated medical waste that's gone through a treatment process.
Okay, well, okay. Did you hear that? It's the stuff that earns the dump money. Okay, well, I have here, I have here a plastic bag in my hand. Now, can anybody tell me what's in here?
Your new CD?
Well, yeah, but, you know, just looking at it, no, you can't tell what's in it. And this is what comes across the scales every day in NCS from God knows where, out of state, etc. Closed trash bags. You can put anything in there, nobody knows. There was some incidents that happened a while back with radioactive waste attempting to be brought into another Casella landfill in Massachusetts. And the only reason that it didn't make it into that landfill was because they had detection systems. We don't have that here in Bethlehem. There's nothing protecting us from those kinds of special wastes coming through the landfill. And if you are going to rubber stamp this permit, I would at least hope that you would address that issue, because we are completely vulnerable. Nobody knows what's in the bag. And by the way, there are CDs in the bag, which